This is very exciting. Hi, this is Dale Peterson, and welcome to the Unsolicited Response Show. Just one quick announcement before I bring my guest on. We've been doing unsolicited response now for over a decade, and we tend to go in and out on whether we take advertising on the podcast. And I've decided for 2024, we will accept one or two advertisers per show. I'll include a link to get information in the show notes, but if you're interested in that, I'd encourage you to sign up. These spots tend to sell out quickly. And with that, I want to dive right into the episode. So Liz, why don't you bring up my guest? My guest for this episode, actually return guest, making his second appearance on the Unsolicited Response Show, is Dave Whitehead, CEO of Schweitzer Engineering Labs, or SEL. Welcome back to the show, Dave.
Hey, Dale, thanks for having me. You kind of makes me chuckle about your returning guest. Maybe this will be something like Saturday Night Live, right? For how many times you get to, I can be the Alec Baldwin or something of unsolicited.
Well, you got some competition there because like Patrick Miller, Ralph Langner, a few of them are about 4 or 5 ahead of you.
Oh
so,
man, I got a lot of work to do to become interesting. So you invite me back more, I guess.
Well, you are interesting, and that's why I got you back here. We talked about 2 years ago. I'll include a link in the show notes, and there we go into a little bit about Dave's history at SEL, what he learned from Ed, and a variety of other things. I thought it was a great show. But one of the things we talked about, and the reason I wanted you back now, was at that time you had just announced, Schweitzer had just announced that you were building a PCB factory in Moscow, Idaho. And you broke ground on it, you built it, and as I understand it, it's up and running now. Is that right?
That is right. We're producing about a quarter of the boards we consume every day coming out of that factory, just 7 miles away from us. So it is up and operational. We'll probably be able to produce all of our circuit boards in about another year. You know, it's we have some pretty complex multi-layer boards that we're working through the qualification process internally before we can go live with those. But in a very short time, we'll be able to produce all of our boards, probably have a little bit of extra capacity. I have some friends that I talk about our PCB factory, and they're asking if I'd be willing to build them circuit boards too. So who knows? Maybe we have another route in our future.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because many, many moons ago, decades ago, when I was with a product company, we outsourced our manufacturing, both generating the boards and actually populating the boards and such. And so it's almost a two-part question. Why would you want to build your own PCB boards? Or that's redundant, your own PCBs.
Yeah.
And now that you have this great facility, why wouldn't you be a contract manufacturer?
Well, let's start with the why. I've been designing, or I used to design circuit boards. Everybody makes fun of me that I don't design them anymore. But when I used to design circuit boards, we do all the internal layouts here at SEL. We've always done that for the 30 plus or the 30-ish years that I've been here. And we take those design Gerber files and send those out to a board house. Almost all of those are in the U.S. And back for the last 20 years, they've all been in the U.S. We like to keep our supply chains as short as possible. There is a lot of IP that goes into our circuit boards. Probably that's, from a hardware design standpoint, that's where all the IP really is how you lay out the boards and connect all the parts on them. So there's a lot of IP risk just sending your boards out. We go back to the time delay of sending it out and then being on somebody else's time schedule for getting circuit boards that back from those fab houses. That slows us down. And you know what? Interesting, I wish we had started this board house about 2 years earlier, because I've been designing stuff for a very long time, and I have never seen a supply chain supply chain problem that we just came out of as so severe as over the last couple of years. It used to be we'd have a supply chain problem with, say, some memories or maybe a microprocessor, or maybe some ceramic caps. 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, it was everything. You just couldn't get everything. So one of our strategies to continue shipping product is we take our engineers and say, hey, we can't get this resistor, we can't get this capacitor, what can we do? And they say, well, I found a different part. It doesn't have quite the same footprint as the one that we couldn't get. So if we could spin the boards, we could get this part and go, stay in production on that particular product line and stuff. The PCB factories got so constrained that I could find parts to replace the ones we couldn't get, but I couldn't get circuit boards say the next 6 months or so. So it really didn't help us. So that was, one of those aha moments. If we had just had our own circuit board factory, we could have made our supply chain challenges go away a much quicker. So that's just keeping supply chains small helps you out. Being able to spin designs quickly, control all of the quality that goes along with it, just makes a lot of sense. And from a capital project, just spending money on it, this is one of the best paybacks. Probably in about 3 years or so, we'll pay back the capital from the savings of building the boards ourselves. So it pays for itself too. It's just good business sense to do.
Well, a lot of things there. The number that I saw in one of the articles was, and it's probably just a ballpark number, but in an order of magnitude, it said 100 million. Is that
It
an
is
order of magnitude?
That is about spot on of what it is, all in with the building and the machines that go inside it.
So that's pretty good to get ROI of 33 million to 50 million a year to pay for it. That is quite an investment, I'm sure.
It is. We use a lot of boards in our products.
Well, and then it was funny you mentioned that, because I pulled out a quote from one of your interviews that you said the PCBs that go into our products probably have the most intellectual property of anything we design right now. And is that something, I'm going to show my lack of engineering skill here, but is that something unique to the type of products you make? Because I've always thought it was in the products I was most familiar with, it was more the software and the firmware where the value and the intellectual property really was. But this, you said it, and I also saw the quote, so it kind of surprised me.
Yeah, and the way I like to look at it is the software can't be written in isolation, and the hardware can't be done in isolation. So both the hardware, the software, and I'll even call it our FPGA designers work really closely together to optimize the design. Especially we're talking about a traveling wave relay. We're sampling it 1 million times a second and making a decision whether to trip a transmission line out of service every 100 microseconds. So the hardware, the software, and the RTL that kind of glues the two together have to be very tightly coupled. So they're driving the software and the RTL are actually driving a lot of decisions to go into this IP we're talking about for developing our hardware.
Well, that makes sense. I didn't really think about the unique timing aspect that you have. Well, not unique. There are other things like that, but it's much different than water, for example, that moves very slowly.
Yeah, well, we're talking about real-time control systems, right? The hardware and the firmware have to be really tightly coupled. It's not like writing a Windows program or a word processor where you actually want to be able to decouple the hardware and the software from each other.
But those timing constraints are even more than what you'd see in a typical DCS system.
Oh, yeah.
Or something of that nature. I mean, that's like 3 to 5 times more than what you'd require there. The other thing, and this really surprised me about what you said in this interview, was I never really thought about respinning a board to address parts issues. And is it very expensive to make those changes in the board and change the line to produce a different board?
The biggest challenge you have with spinning the board so that you can put a part you can get versus the one you can't get is, what do you do about requalifying the part? If you've ever looked at any of our data sheets, the back of it is just filled with hundreds of certifications and testing and qualifications. So that's where the most amount of costs come from is recertifying products. How much do you have to do? And that really depends on how big a change or departure you're going from one part to another. But when it comes to our SMT lines, or where we actually manufacture the boards or put the parts on the boards, that's really not a big deal. We can send up a new file saying, hey, this part is now looks like this versus the old one. Put it here as opposed to put it there. So that part's not too big a deal. It's really the part I always get a little bit squeamish about is how much requalification you have to do with a part.
And then where do you put the SMT, the surface mount stuff? Where is that actually done? Is that done in Moscow or is that done back in Pullman?
That's actually done in two places close to us. So here in Pullman, we have about 250,000 square feet of electronic manufacturing space. So we send the boards from Moscow over to here. It's about 7 miles away. We also have a very similar microelectronics assembly plant down in Lewiston, Idaho, which is about 40 miles south of us also over in Idaho. And we can send circuit boards down there to build our electronic devices.
Wow. Well, just a little bit more on the manufacturing side, because I think we went over this in the last show where you said you still manufactured your own computers, you do power supplies. What currently don't you manufacture that goes in the product? What are you still outsourcing?
Ooh, let's think. LCDs right now. We outsource LCDs. And you know what? If you come back and we talk in 2 years, I bet we either are or we're close to making our own LCDs in the future. I think that's about the biggest thing. You know, we shoot plastics, we bend metal, we paint metal, we build our own transformers. We're building ferrites right now. You know, basically ferrites is a little bit of iron and rust. You squish it together and wrap some wire around it to make a choke or some kind of inductor filter. So it's we love building stuff. I don't know if that's not what we should be doing, you know, anti-American, but these days it's, man, the more we can build here on US shores, and we're showing that, yeah, it is possible. You don't need to outsource stuff. It's totally within our power, our grasp. And I feel almost some kind of duty to be able to build parts here in America.
Do you think you could do it less expensively if you outsourced everything?
I think now we have to define what's less expensive, right? Because with
Less expensive product cost,
yeah,
lifetime cost.
Well, okay, I bet you're right. Product cost, I could probably get some cost, but you know, we have this 10-year and essentially what it is, a lifetime warranty. So by being able to build everything ourselves, I get a lot of control over the quality of the whatever it is we're building, whether it's the electronic device or the parts that go in them. We found that to be incredibly valuable. Just to be able to make sure that we know exactly what's happening with our supply chain.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You don't see much of that here. I do wonder if we're going to start seeing more. If there was a, you know, the pendulum, anything that swings when it's up on one end, it kind of slows down, and it seems to be slowly coming back down. I won't say it's a fast movement, but we are seeing a lot more people talking, at least, about bringing things back here, and some people doing it. So you might be a trailblazer here, and then once everyone's bringing it back here, maybe you'll outsource. But I doubt that.
I doubt we'll ever outsource. I like the spot we're in.
Yeah. Well, now the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I warned you, this might be the touchier subject, is software bill of materials, SBOM.
Yeah.
So there's tremendous amount of buzz about this. Less actually happening, but a lot of talk about, and this is something that will take years to do. So that's, you know, partially that's not moving as fast as people would like, but partially reality that you just can't move certain things quickly. But the software bill of materials gotten a lot of attention from DHS and other parts of the U.S. government. We have vendors offering it, offering services to provide these, to create these. There's various tools that will do all this. And the kind of the utopian view that I hear in the marketplace is that an asset owner will be able to know and get an SBOM for every product that they purchase and use. And I've heard some grumbling about SEL in this area, that SEL doesn't really think that's the right thing to do. But rather than put words in your mouth, what is SEL's position on sharing SBOMs with customers, with the more general public? What's your view on that?
Well, let's go back probably to the beginning of SEL and just talk about the nature of bills of materials, whether they're software or hardware. If when I put my quality hat on, you know, it's imperative that SEL have good records, bills of materials, whether it's software or hardware, for all of our products. And I bring that up. If we find a problem, say with a diode or something like that, I need to know what the lot code was, which products it was installed in, and because we build a lot of products, and the only way I can do that is by having really good records of the bills of material for our hardware, and also we can do it similarly for software bills of materials. If there is a particular piece of code that went out in a handful of products and a version number of our firmware, I need to know where those are so I can talk to our customers and say, hey, we sent you 3 relays. They're affected either by this SBOM defect or a hardware bomb defect. And we've used that throughout our company's history to make sure that our customers always have the best, most reliable products out there. We fast forward now where everybody's talking about providing SBOMs to folks, and here's maybe why folks are saying we're grumbling, because I sit back and I ask myself, if when I provide you an SBOM, what exactly are you going to be able to do with that? And now we have different revisions of firmware or hardware. If we're talking about HBOMs, those things are going to be spinning. So I'm curious to how a customer may have that information. What is he or she going to be actually able to do with it? Rather, I think SEL is a very reliable source. So if there's a question about software, the customer can come to us and we can put it into context if there's a problem with a particular piece of firmware or a particular piece of hardware, and working with the customers get to a good solution that benefits the customer. And I think we've done that throughout certainly our 40 years of being in business.
Well, let's kind of take a step back. So you have the internal need, that in this case SEL or any manufacturer would have to know what's in their product. Are you going to the point where where we see some of the challenges are a lot of times, especially in the software world, you will buy a software component so you'll know that element, but then that software component has other components in that, sometimes open source. So you have kind of these tiers. I think the people from Finite State said they estimated about 80% of the software in a lot of the products. They probably weren't talking about yours. They were probably talking more software-based products. So maybe things more like your RTAC and things like that are more heavily software had subcomponents in them. So when the asset owner said, hey, we have a SBOM, they knew kind of the top level things that they acquired, purchased, or downloaded and put in, but they didn't know what was in those products. Is SEL going to the effort to try to find out what's in the products that you purchase?
Well, yeah. And, now we're getting into supply chain and all of the challenges that represents. But stepping back just a second, for the majority of our products, certainly all the relay products, we like to write our own firmware. So there's, it's an internal SBOM, if you will, right? We have all the files. On the occasions where we do buy, say, a third-party library, we don't accept binaries. Rather, we only accept source code, right? So then we can do our quality checks and run our scans and what have you on that. So we're never going to compile in a binary. Rather, we're going to compile in raw, source code C, whatever it might be, into our products. It gives us a lot of visibility. The other thing we're also very particular about is going through and making sure, let's say you buy a library, and there's a lot of stuff that might come with those particular libraries. And because we have the source code, not a binary, we can take out all the code that we don't need or don't want in our completed binary, or our completed firmware file, which allows us to, just to make sure that we're not carrying along things we don't know what they may or may not be, because we're not using them in our particular applications.
Are you moving towards some of the more standard ways of describing or outputting SBOMs like Cyclone DX or SPDX?
We've created like VEX documents, and we put it in the Cyclone DX format for a handful of customers that have requested these things. So on a case by case basis, a customer comes to us under NDA, we'll say, hey, yeah, we'll generate the file, recognizing that there is a limited life to that, because we'll continue to put enhancements into products and new features into stuff.
Sure.
And so that continues to spin. So just because a customer has a particular, SBOM or something like that, it's now their challenge to make sure, hey, it's the latest and greatest for whatever fleet of products they might have in service.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you, though, going back to one of your earlier comments. It makes a ton of sense for the manufacturer, for the vendor to have this. And, I'm not in your internal processes, but based on what I've seen, I would imagine that SEL probably is one of the better at tracking what's in their systems, just based on what you do and how you do it. A lot of vendors don't have that. A lot of vendors lose that as they go from version to version. They might know the current version, but they don't know 5 versions back, and they don't have a lot of that information. So I think some of this push will actually help the vendors kicking and screaming, but to move to modern development processes. So that's good. Where it's harder is when you think about, okay, now let's say they existed and let's say they were made generally available to all the customers. What the heck the customer's going to do with it?
Yeah. That's where I struggle. It's like, man, am I going to make our local utility Avista here responsible now for not only our bills and materials, our SBOMs, but everybody else's that might go in their system? And how would they, on a daily basis, manage any or all of that?
Well, and I've written about this. I envision there will be a marketplace, and this is probably 5-10 years out, where the asset owner won't actually collect these SBOMs, but they'll be able to query them and get information on request. But really the reason you want an SBOM, well, one thing you can do right now is an asset owner can go and ask their vendor, do you have an SBOM? Let me see the SBOM. Even if I can't take it in my hands, let me just at least know you have this capability and your development process is mature. Kind of like we used to ask, do you have a security development life cycle?
Yeah.
And just show me some evidence that you've done it. I'm not going to evaluate it. At least I know you have something. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, you'd like to know, and everyone points to Log4j. It wasn't that impactful to the OT world. But there could be, let's say, some library or some component that is widely used, some, let's say, DNP3 stack or IEC stack or something like that that's widely used, that you might not know about as the asset owner, and you might say, I need to know if this is in my system. So that's where an SBOM could play a role. You could actually query and say, you could query some database and say, do I have this? Or you could go to the vendor and say, do you have this? Or the third step, the vendor could be proactive and be monitoring these things and notifying the asset owners, their customers, hey, not only our code doesn't have a problem, but some code we use has a problem, and you need to do this sort of thing. What approach of those three or some other derivative do you see SEL taking in the next 3 years?
So where I hope we're headed as an industry is probably not dissimilar to when everybody started really getting into quality systems, and there was the big push for ISO 9001, and really what that certification allowed a customer to do was, because a company was 9001 certified, had some level of assurance, or I won't quite use the word guarantee, right? But to some level of assurance that the company they're dealing with really does have they can spec, design, build, test stuff in a well-documented manner. I think, or I would hope, that's where we're going to end up with this desire for SBOMs, rather than I have to send my quality program for how I'm going to manufacture a board to one of my customers. They can say, hey, they must be able to build quality circuit boards because they're ISO 9001 certified, and they get that certification. They get audited every year by somebody that's skilled in the art of what they're doing. We were recently certified to what's it called, 62443-4-1, right? Which is essentially the product security development lifecycle requirements plan. Which I, in my simple mind, make that analogous to the ISO 9001, where we become in and audited. And part of that is, elements of it, can you generate, and do you have SBOMs or HBOMs or what have you? And I think that should go a long ways to ensuring or maybe demonstrating to customers that, we've got a very secure product security development process established at SEL, and we'll be audited every year to make sure that we maintain the requirements for that certification.
Well, let me try to put it in simpler terms, because
okay,
I think those three were unnecessarily confusing.
Okay.
I think it
Or
boils
you want
down
a
to
shorter
two.
answer? Is that
No. I don't think I asked a good question. I
okay?
think in my mind it works one or two ways. Someone has to be monitoring the solution, the product, for vulnerabilities. And you can
Yep.
do that now. An asset owner can do that at a top level with the CVE. Or I remember way back in the day, SEL would notify the vendors. You would do it internally and you would notify them. We have sort of the same issue with SBOM. It's just more difficult. So the asset owner could have the SBOM and be looking at everything and saying, is there a vulnerability that needs to be addressed? Or the vendor could have the SBOM and be looking if there's something needs to be addressed and issue a bulletin or something, or a maintenance alert or something like that. I'm guessing you're more on the vendor do this work.
Maybe this will surprise you, but I think there's a place for. Did you say 3 different ways? Let me do this. So let's talk about the internal stuff. So we've got our internal SBOMs. Some of the on those SBOMs are third-party things we buy, and I
Right.
have a group of folks that will go through on a very periodic basis. It's probably at least once a month, maybe it's a little bit more than that, to make sure that are there any changes to the libraries that we have purchased and we use in our particular product. So that's kind of our internal way of using our SBOMs and validating. Is there a change? And if there's a change in the firmware or the libraries that we purchased, understanding what those changes were to see what the impact would be to the products we're presently using those components in. Then so that's how we're using the SBOMs internally, as you pointed out, so that we're checking stuff on
Right.
our own. The second one is if a customer, that say there's a CEV or something like that, a customer has a question for it, they can certainly contact us, and I can quickly run a report on the present state of the SBOM, or maybe they have an older product and I can go back and look at a previous version of what that SBOM might entail. So they can come in and do this, and we're certainly happy to do that. You mentioned how we call them a service bulletin process. If we find a defect or a problem with either hardware or software, we'll actually proactively reach out to the customers that are impacted by that particular defect. And so we don't have to blast it out to everybody. We can contact customers directly if they have that particular product and not bother the ones that don't have that product. We've also done a next step, and we're standing this up and starting rolling it out to customers where they have their own portal and they can log in at any time to look at the status of any product they have, if there's a service bulletin issued against it. So they can in real time come and pull and see if there's any issues with any products, and they can do that on their time frame.
But there's no plan as of yet to give them in that portal to say, here, you can download the SBOM for that product.
There's not a plan. We had a customers that have gotten interested in SBOMs, and on those particular cases, we've sat down and we've showed them what the SBOM is for their particular products. Right now, most I think everybody's struggling is like, if I ask for the data, what am I going to do with it? Is it going to give me the result I need or want, or is there a better way to do it?
Yeah, I think that's the government is going to, the U.S. government's going to run into this with these requirements to get all these SBOMs. They're going to get just inundated in files that are just going to sit there because they won't be able to use them. But
yeah,
okay, well, I appreciate that. You ready for another topic, or did you have anything else on SBOM?
No.
Okay.
We could probably talk about SBOMs for days, though, right? And not solving world problems.
Well, but the only reason I actually changed, Josh Corman changed my mind on this, is I think the government requirements for SBOMs will help push vendors that don't have that level of control to have it. Even if it's not needed by the end user or being able to be used by the end user, if we can just improve the front end, the development side of it, so maybe 5 to 10 years when we're ready to use it, it'll be there, and the product quality would improve.
I think the goal then, I think, should be is let's get back to the equivalent of that ISO 9001 certification. I think that the SBOM is like a byproduct of what they're trying to achieve. Really, what they want is these customers to try to implement a secure, cybersecurity or control of your software. That's the ultimate goal, and then the SBOM is an output, I think, of that. So maybe focus our effort on the how do you get a development process in place that does that, as opposed to just the SBOM itself?
Well, yes, when I talked to the Cyclone DX people, they said if you're using a modern build environment, there's plugins to create Cyclone DX
Yeah.
SBOMs. So
Yeah.
if you're not able to do it, it probably means you're using a non-modern build environment, which probably needs to be addressed. Okay, let's go to a quote here. In PCB 007, which I guess is some sort of magazine, I wasn't familiar with that, but it says, there was a question, where do you think leaders tend to go wrong when developing a strategy? And your answer was, usually it's because your strategy gets disconnected from the customer and customers' needs. And I found that interesting. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you meant by that?
Yeah, we here at SEL, and Ed has really instilled this on us. When whatever it is we're doing, right, you start with the customer. And I think as organizations tend to grow, or if you get disassociated with your customer, what are their real problems, or what are their needs? Then you start doing, well, what's best. And I won't say it, I don't want to mean to say it quite this way, but what's best for me, right? If I'm in manufacturing, right, I can probably optimize my process to build a particular product, or a part of a product. But if I'm not taking the big picture of how is the customer going to use it, or how does whatever I'm doing benefit the customer, um, I think you start veering off from really what it is you're trying to do as an organization, right? And ours is to make electric power safer, more reliable. And how does that fall through to the customer, and then ultimately to whether we build a PCB factory, or whether we go and invest in something, or create a new product. Does that make sense? Did I?
It does. At a high level, it makes sense. I think actually doing it's probably harder. Do you have a case where you found yourself doing something or almost doing something that wouldn't have done that, and how you recognize that and pulled back from it?
Let's see if I got a good example. I'll go back to my manufacturing analogy, right? At one point, we said, "Hey, let's improve our manufacturing efficiency by 3%." Right. And so everybody, there's different departments within the manufacturing, and everybody optimized for their 3%. And we probably, lost 12% of efficiency or something like that, because there's always handoffs between different organizations. And if I just optimize for what I can do, right, I'm probably doing it at the detriment of the next part of the flow line, if you will. And so this is, I don't know, a handful of years ago, we stepped way back and said, hey, how are we going to improve our lead times? We want to have lead times of 5 days, and maybe they were at 10 days. When we stepped back and we started looking at where were the gaps between different divisions in our organization. That's what we saw. People were optimizing very specifically for what they did at the detriment of how it related to the rest of the organization. I probably got 100 different examples besides just manufacturing on where that is. And if we step back and say, what's our goal? What do our customers need? That's how you start, I think, developing your strategy, and making sure that strategy then aligns to the benefit of our customers.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a challenge, because I saw your latest numbers. You're 6,300 or so employees now. I mean, getting everyone to think that way it's probably easy to veer off track on that. And do you have any way that you stay on track? I mean, what is it that keeps you focused on this customer need?
Here's one of our, I won't call it our secrets, but our benefits. We're an employee-owned company, 100% employee-owned company. And that really puts puts you in the mindset of everything I do affects what the stock price is going to be of our company. I'm not a derivative off. If I were working for Apple and, I have external investors or something like that, rather, whether I'm working on an assembly line, I'm designing a new product, I'm out selling or promoting a new thing, all of that goes into creating great products or solutions that customers want. They pay for them. And then that by its, or in effect, drives up our stock price. So that keeps us really, really tight. Ed's also put in a handful of really good activities that we continue to this day. One of those we've talked about is our Friday lunch, where we get the entire company together to talk about how our sales, what problems did we have, what's going on in the company, what are we going to develop next, and it really brings in this ownership and this almost this family feeling for what we're doing. It keeps us all aligned and a focus on the customer.
Okay, two quick things to finish off here with Dave Whitehead, CEO of SEL, and I should have mentioned it before, host of the Schweitzer Drive podcast.
Sign up and listen to it. You and my mom can be listeners of my podcast.
I do listen to the relevant episodes. It's quite good. Two quick things: have the substation shootings affected SEL at all? Do you get requests for differences in your products, or are you just inside the building so they don't really matter?
Yeah, we haven't, we do think about how we might be able to participate to keep substations, safer and if there is a problem, be able to warn or identify. But directly, it hasn't impacted us or our line of business.
Okay, and the other one is Blueframe, which is your virtualized offering that you have for your SELs 3350, 3355, 3360, configuration monitoring, disturbance monitoring, such. How has been the uptake on those? Have people liked running things on Blueframe?
I am so happy at the success we're having. I think every time I go out and talk to a customer, they are very excited about Blueframe. And just for folks listening, I make the analogy that we build great hardware. Think of that as your iPhone, and think of Blueframe as iOS. And then we start building applications that go on top of it, whether it's some kind of SCADA function or some other thing, whether it's a network controller or our RTAC applications. And so we're seeing a lot of success. People like the fact that we can divorce it from or separate it from the hardware, and I can run it on our own computer platforms, or we can virtualize it. You can run it on a server if you want to. So it's really a great way to put on new applications, make it run where you want to, at the edge or on a server or what have you. So yeah, customers are really excited about Blueframe right now.
Well, that's good to hear. I had no doubt of the value of the technology. I mean, you see it everywhere. You see virtualization containers used. It's once you get into it, you say, "Oh, this is so much better," just because of some of the things you said, and also just being able to upgrade, replace, move from one system to another very easily. You're not as locked in. We see the potential. Actually, Siemens announced it recently, and a couple others have these, where the PLC vendors are actually going down to level 1, where they're saying everything but I/O is running in a container, in a Blueframe sort of environment. Do you see Blueframe pushing down further in the SEL product line, or are those just too physically? I guess the main function is to do something physical, that Blueframe isn't of value there.
I think we're going to see more applications run on Blueframe, and where I think we're going to see a line is going to be for the PLC like functions. I think they're probably a good candidate for Blueframe apps. But I think when we get back to the protection and control, like we were talking about earlier in the program, where we're doing things at 100 microseconds and there's a tight coupling between the protection and the hardware, that's probably, at least not right now, probably a candidate for Blueframe.
Blueframe is a good name, but I keep getting mixed up Blueflame and Blueframe.
You sound like me when they first pitched the Blueframe name to me.
Well, especially since I have a Japanese wife, she'd have trouble with those.
Well, I should never name anything, because I'd always name it product 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Because I'm just an engineer, and I don't know how to name things.
Marketing people do have their values, Dave.
Yes, they do.
Well, I appreciate you coming back on the show. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight for kind of the early adopter ICS security listener that tends to watch or listen to the show?
Well, hey, thanks for having me back on. My advice, recommendation is ask questions. Ask questions of your vendor. If you're buying stuff from us and you have a question, give us a call. We'd like to talk to you about SBOMs or HBOMs or Blueframe or for any of this stuff, right? The more our customers are educated, I think that the better off, we are as folks that need to use electricity every single day around the country and around the world.
And I should note, give you a little pitch here that SEL does have training, right? Security
Oh yeah.
training and of course training on the product, but security training, security consulting services on how to best deploy their systems and architect the systems and a line of security products too. So they're one of the companies that kind of were first and leading edge on this security front. And I know the community appreciates that, Dave.
Well, thank you. Hey, let me give you a shout out since you gave me one. We're looking forward to being out at S4 this year. Nick Seeley is going to be on the center stage, and he's already getting excited about talking at your conference.
Well, and SEL will have a prime room too, so I'm sure you'll be demoing a lot of stuff for people. Okay, well, Dave Whitehead, CEO of SEL and host of the Schweitzer Drive podcast. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Dale. Have a great day.